Between the 1960s and the 1980s, the toy aisle was in a constant state of evolution. If you were lucky enough to grow up during that time period, what you saw was 1959, the introduction of Barbie, which quickly inspired G.I. Joe and Combat Joe, which then inspired $6 Million Man and Henshin Cyborg, which led to Microman and Micronauts, which led to Star Wars, which led to so many other cool things. You never knew what you were going to see in the toy aisle next because it was a very lucrative industry, and toy companies were stumbling over each other to figure out how to be the next toy line that all the cool kids were collecting on the playground. Well, we've already explored the early part of that history. If you're curious knowing about how we got from Barbie to Transformers, well, I've got a link for you above you can check out. But let's talk about the next stage after that. After all, this is beyond Transformers. Where did toys go after Transformers took over in 1984? We're going to look at that today. We'll then briefly discuss why evolution sort of stopped after that. Because while toys today do look different than they did in the 1980s, for example, if you're an action figure collector, they have a lot more articulation now. If you're a Transformers collector, some of them are immensely more sophisticated than they used to be. But there's a difference between updating a toy and evolving a toy. And we'll get into that today when we look at the next step in transforming toy evolution after Transformers, which was 1985's Kenner M.A.S.K series. That stands for Mobile Action Strike Command. Yeah, that's command with a K. Between that and the backwards R from Toys R Us, it's kind of amazing any of us passed first grade. Maybe deregulating kids' commercials back in the 80s didn't do us a favor. But anyway, if you were around in 1985, 1986, there's no doubt you remember Kenner M.A.S.K. Probably had that infectious theme song stuck in your head. No kidding, back in the 1990s as a teenager, I had the tune in my head still and couldn't remember where the heck it came from. I just heard, da 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 da. Masked Crusaders working overtime, fighting crime. Da 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 da. Took me ages until YouTube came around to figure out where the heck that jingle came from. But M.A.S.K had a whole lot to offer. Before I get into what that series was about, though, let's take a step backwards and talk about the history of Kenner as a toy maker and how it led them to this pivotal moment where they created the M.A.S.K series that I feel is so much more important than history remembers. So back in the 1970s is when Kenner first really made waves in the toy aisle. They'd been around for a long time before that. But in 1976, they were looking overseas and seeing the exciting things that Takara was doing with Microman, a toy line where they'd shrunken down the standard 12 and 8-inch action figures and made them to 3.75-inch scale so that they could work with inexpensive, vast vehicles and playsets. And kids could collect entire lines of these toys instead of just one or two cherished ones, because at a smaller scale, it was easier to produce everything cheaper. As a result, Microman was a huge hit in Japan, and Takara is making plans to bring it overseas to the United States, where it eventually showed up in the form of Micronauts that same year. So here's Kenner saying, how do we take the current toy line in America and make it that? They gained the license to Star Wars in 1976 and gave it the Microman approach. They produced figures at a 3.75-inch scale so they could create many vehicles and playsets, and it was a huge disruptor and game changer. Mego had been the standard at that time period, producing 8-inch tall licensed action figures, and they fell by the wayside fast once kids got a whiff of Star Wars. It was a huge hit. And as a result, Kenner was the dominant toy line in the toy aisles from 1976 all the way up until 1982, when a new competitor entered. That's when we got Masters of the Universe from Mattel. And their claim to fame, even before there was a cartoon, was that their figures were a little bit bigger and came with action abilities. They could do things. Most of them had the standard thing where you twisted their waist and they would fling like that and bitch slap their opponents. That was what most did. A few had other features, and that got attention for a while. Plus, a hit cartoon series was very helpful as well. Kenner made plans to respond to that next because they were all about evolution and staying ahead of the curve. So 2 years after that, 1984, they came out with Superpowers, a toy line featuring licensed DC superhero characters that also came with action features, except they had a bigger diversity of them. Whereas most human action figures had the bitch slap feature, a lot of Kenner Superpowers figures did different things. Some could punch, some could run, some could smash, some could do other things. Ramen kicked. I remember that one. It's been a while. But the point being that there was a bigger diversity of action abilities these characters could do. And it also had the DC superhero license as well. So that was primed to become a serious competitor in the market. But then in 1984, as that toy line was really capturing attention, that's when Hasbro entered the market with Transformers.
Transformers, more than meets the eye. The Transformers from Marvel Comics.
Now, robot toy lines had already been the rage in the United States for at least a year. Everybody was making them, everybody was experiencing huge success selling them. But Transformers came in and Hasbro did two things differently. One, they named their toy line the very name parents were already using to describe these generic types of toys. They're Transformers. What kind of Transformer do you have? GoBots. What kind of Transformer do you have? Motobot. What kind of Transformer do you have? The real one? Ha 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 ha. And as a result, Transformers gained some success that way. It was also a higher quality toy. They had an arrangement with Marvel, a comic book series, and eventually a cartoon. They licensed and packaged this thing incredibly well. And don't get me wrong, most of those toys truly were high quality. But man, Hasbro had their advertising game on. In 1985, they took their advertising to the next level. And that's where it matters for this episode today. You see, Hasbro wasn't content to have a share of the Transformer robot market. They wanted all of it. So they tried an advertisement that still has ripple effects today. I've talked about this in other videos before. They introduced rub stickers. These little stickers that go on the transforming robots. You press your finger against it and it tells you if it's a Decepticon or an Autobot. That in itself wasn't a big deal, but they had these commercials that went along with it.
We are conquerors.
No one is like us.
Only we have the right to be called by the name.
Only we have the right to wear this symbol.
Or this symbol.
Only we are Autobots and Decepticons.
Good versus evil.
And only we have the right to be called the Transformers.
The Transformers.
Only the Transformers are real Transformers, each sold separately from Hasbro.
That's right. If your Transform robot toy does not have that rub sticker, if it's not an Autobot or Decepticon, it's not a real Transformer. Which was ridiculous because most of these toy lines have been around before Hasbro started the Transformers toy line. But message received, everything else is a cheap knockoff. If you want to show off on the playground and have some clout, if you want to be the parent on the block who buys the best toys for your kids, it's Transformers or nothing. And it worked. Most other robot toy lines died out pretty fast. Some clung on for a while, but sales were down dramatically. And the playing field was essentially leveled. Every competitor was knocked out. And it's exactly at this point, through coincidence, I think more than planning, that Kenner shows up with their answer to transforming robot toys. Instead of trying to do what everybody else was doing and either import Japanese robot toys or Japanese robot toy designs that had been unproduced previously, see my episode on Starcom, they tried to stay in their own wheelhouse while expanding out towards Transformers. And so as a result, what they created was a toy line centered on small action figures, little tiny guys who fit inside vehicles and playsets that transformed. No robots, no attempt to be Transformers. It was Kenner doing what they already did best, but with transforming technology now. And the exciting, interesting part was, it was done by a brand new team of designers who, when you look at the actual patents for these toys, none of these guys had ever done transforming toys before. And all of them were actual employees by Kenner. They weren't buying stuff from overseas. They were making it in-house. And as a result, Kenner M.A.S.K toys transformed differently than anything else out there. And one of the big differences was they didn't try for a total transformation. The goal was not to go from one mode to a totally different mode. It was to take innocuous everyday vehicles and transform them into highly armored vehicles. And it worked. It worked really well. Hasbro had knocked all the competitors out, so they had a pretty successful cartoon, an extremely catchy theme song, really great toys, and they were ready to be a serious competitor to Transformers. What happened ultimately? Home game systems happened ultimately. Nintendo was introduced around this time and was starting to get more and more attention. It was taking up more and more space in Toys R Us. More and more kids were having it top their wish lists for birthdays and holidays. And as a result, most toy lines and toy manufacturers began to experience a decline. M.A.S.K was really immensely successful for 2 years, and then sales just sort of dropped off. It wasn't through any fault of theirs. The toys were getting better and better. It's just that the market wasn't there anymore. So evolution stopped. But Kenner M.A.S.K is a phase in transforming history where we went one step beyond transforming robot toys. Instead of having transforming toys sitting in the action figure aisle, what about having an action figure line with actual vehicles and playsets that transformed and integrated with regular action figures? Wouldn't that be a better idea? And it was. Had Kenner kept going or attracted competitors who tried to beat them at their own game, had this been a thing, it might have been immensely successful. In recent years, we've seen Transformers try to actually tap into this. The Transformers G.I. Joe crossover has begun to do this with vehicles from G.I. Joe that transform into robots. It's a cool idea. But Kenner did it better. And had they kept going, who knows where toys would have gone. But for right now, I've talked enough about the history. Let's get into the toy line itself. Either you're already a fan of M.A.S.K or you're curious to learn more about it, but one important thing you should know either way is M.A.S.K is coming back. In 2025, a company known as the Loyal Subjects is reintroducing M.A.S.K to direct order toys. I don't know if you'll see them on toy shelves anywhere, but you can absolutely place pre-orders right now. They've re-released some of the original wave of Kenner M.A.S.K toys from 1985. They've made a couple changes. Mostly it's in the details. There's a little bit higher quality paint jobs in some of these toys, slightly different colors on a few things, and the figures themselves are more articulate. They have more joints. But otherwise, it is reissues of the original toys. Only a few right now, I think 4. But if it does well, hopefully there will be more. Meanwhile, a third-party company known as Ramen Toys is also making their own unofficial M.A.S.K toys right now, at a higher price point because they're producing less units. But it's good stuff and interesting to watch. There is a demand for these toys, and they're finally coming back. So let's take a look at the original toys today, because my plan is to show you my top 5 favorite Kenner M.A.S.K toys from the original series. Let's go to the work table and check them out. So this is the Buzzard, a late entry into M.A.S.K's toy line. This was part of their Series 3. I don't think it ever made its way into the cartoon. And it's not much to look at first. That is clearly not a real driver. They could have done a little better to make that look believable. Simple toy. And the transformation is ridiculously simple and yet immensely satisfying. Normally, I'm a fan of toys that have a total transformation. You do a bunch of logical, fun, satisfying steps to get from one mode to the next. This is you hit one button and watch it do its thing. So I'm going to hit a button, and we're going to watch it do its thing. There we go. It launches 2 smaller vehicles out. It's a really cool concept. 2 little, almost Tron-like bikes. They're really cool. It even says Venom in case you weren't sure which side they're on. And each one is owned by one of the Mayhems. Miles Mayhem right here. He was the main bad guy of the series with his little mask right there, letting him do cool things. He's in there. Detailed figure. By the way, these guys, if you don't know, were pretty detailed and articulate. A lot like the Starcom toy line I recently did. Satisfying in their own right. Smaller than a Star Wars figure or a Kenner Superpowers figure, but still enough to still be the mainstay of the series while the vehicles take secondary focus. So there's Miles right there. The other one is either his brother or his clone. This is, oh, it's not Miles. It's, oh, I forget his name. It also starts with an M. But anyway, I just really love the uniqueness of this toy design. It looked like one solid vehicle. Oh, and by the way, this thing too does have wings that come out somewhere. There they are. So then I guess that's a vehicle too. It's not much of one, but there you go. It does that. But these are the real heart of the series. They're what I love. And it's just utterly unique. Oh, I forgot. We can make a little gun come out there too. That's pretty awesome. Just a really satisfying, cool toy. That is Buzzard, my number 5 pick. My number 4 is Jackhammer from Series 1. While he has not been included in the reissue line yet, I strongly believe that if the reissue line sells well, we'll be seeing him in Wave 2. He's just a really solid toy that does a lot of fun stuff. He converts from a truck to an armored truck, and here's how he does so. First, it doesn't help that he has a little switch right there. I wish that weren't so obvious, but you do that. A really cool feature. Not only does he get armor plating over his window, but this comes down, he's got You know, a little machine gun that automatically goes back there. That's very satisfying stuff. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see that better. Very, very cool. On top of that, and just as kinesthetically, tactilely satisfying, if we press this bumper in the back, whoa, that pops up. And just by pulling this, we have both a chair for the pilot to sit in and guns. Whoever designed this one clearly loved what they did. It's a very well-designed, well-considered toy. So we can just take our guy out here. I don't remember his name. He's got that really creepy mask. And the masks gave them superpowers or something or other. I didn't really understand and didn't really care. I was in it for the transforming vehicles. I figure most of us were. But this thing can pivot. And it doesn't do anything while we move along like the lower guns do, but it's still pretty freaking awesome. That's the Jackhammer, and it's just a really satisfying, fun, transforming merger of action figures and vehicles in one. This is Manta, piloted by Vanessa Warfield. Man, when you're born with a last name like Warfield, you kind of have to become part of a bad guy group. This is also from Series 3, so a lot of people never saw it. I didn't find it until I acquired it on eBay a few years ago because it was just so badass I kind of had to. And there's a lot of thought that went into this one as well. It's not quite the same experience as Jackhammer was in that you have a lot of complex things that work together. It just does a lot of different things. You can tell whoever designed this one was more of an action figure person than a transforming person because it's less about a satisfying transformation and more about how many cool features can we cram into one vehicle. So we'll start with the obvious. When you do this, woo, wings come out. I mean, that's a cool start, wouldn't you say? And if we do it again, that shoots out too. That's a lot of cool stuff happening from one button right there. On top of that, we can make a few smaller adjustments. It was common in M.A.S.K to have wheels that rotated like this to reveal something new. In this case, we've got little fins with even more guns right there. It's pretty darn cool. Back here is probably my favorite part of this. There's no button to press, but you just pull on this thing and then lift up. And you've got a little tail right there. You got a little exhaust that shoots out as well. Pretty cool looking toy, ultimately. A lot happened pretty quickly. You can still tell that's not a total transformation. It's still very much the same vehicle. But it's got all this cool armor to it now. And one last little cool feature I really enjoy. It's such a minor thing, but it's so satisfying. Should someone leap into the passenger seat and annoy Vanessa enough, this button is an ejector seat. It's just a little cool feature this toy didn't need to have. They're like, you know what? Let's put in one more thing as well. Manta does a whole lot. Very satisfying toy, and that's why it's my number 3. Number 2 is the Raven from Series 2. In many ways, it's similar to the Manta. It's a trendy sports car with a lot of cool abilities. Some of those abilities are remarkably similar. But what I love about the Raven is, whether intended or otherwise, probably intended, it bears a striking resemblance to Kit from Knight Rider. Even at the age of 8, my nostalgia was activated heavily by this toy because I didn't have a transforming Knight Rider toy. Who did? Didn't exist. The big difference, of course, is whereas in Knight Rider, this would be an LED light display that went back and forth, this is a deadly weapon for Raven. What you'd do is you would pull the loader back here, and then you'd press this button up top. Unfortunately, mine doesn't work anymore, but it would launch a spinning disc, a red spinning disc right out at you. But that was a lot of what I loved about this toy to begin with. Of course, the rest of what it does is frankly awesome as well. In my mind, it almost had several different stages. Instead of going from one mode to the next, you had a lot of mix and match options you could use. So for example, with the push of a license plate, what a cool idea. Wow! All of those jet engines pop up, as well as giving him a nice spoiler right there for a little accelerated drive if he needs it. On top of that, too, he has these inverted gull wings that when you open up, he can sort of fly, I guess. In fact, we can move his wheels, and then he really is a flying plane of sorts. By the way, they gave him seatbelts. I mean, talk about level of detail right there. Talk about trying to send a good message to kids. But on top of that, if you wanted to be extra fancy, if you was going to a combat mode, you'd hit this button right here, and whoa! Now he's got like a super armored front part, and these things can become sort of like little lasers that shoot out and rotate 360 degrees, and you've got a very different vehicle now. By the way, the ones on the bottom can shoot as well and sort of get underneath the vehicle. You got those too. But it's a really, really cool toy that does a lot with the little space that it has. Lots of options. And that's why this is my number 2. Here's our number 1. This is Rhino. Really the centerpiece of the entire M.A.S.K collection, and the only one I'm featuring today that is part of the new reissue line coming out from the loyal subjects. In fact, this is sort of the centerpiece of their entire relaunch. There are a lot of larger M.A.S.K vehicles that fans tend to go towards. I find most of them really uninspired, but this one really captured my imagination as a kid and still impresses me today. Really, my only regret with this toy is, I grew up a Transformers fan. I always wanted a trailer. How cool would that have been to have turned into a whole command center in and of itself? That would have been a thrill. We never did get it. But I do want to show you what this toy does today, from spinning a radar dish right there. That's simple but fun, to all the other fun things it does. First of all, when it goes into strike command mode, you gotta love the fact that these little smokestacks become weaponized. It's a really cool idea. On top of that, if another vehicle should, cause them troubles or get in the way, or even come in and attack them, you can press a button right back here and whoa! That's pretty satisfying too. Finally, and this is, well, not even finally, there are 2 other things this toy does, and they're the really fun special parts. So for one of them, let's zoom in a little bit. We're going to look at the back part of this toy. It detaches, and you get a little tank out of it, which is a really freaking cool idea. It's a little tank that you can put a person inside of. Awesome. On top of that, I love what the back of this thing does. What we're going to do, I'm going to slide out a little bit there, so you can see a little bit better. This back portion is going to slide out here. This folds up. This swings down. And we have an entire little command center in there. And you can see, yeah, it's a really fun idea for a kid in 1985. I always was a big fan of play sets, and this just captured my imagination immensely. It did come with 2 action figures as opposed to the 1. You had Matt Tracker, our main character, who came with 2 different vehicles in the beginning. This one and the less expensive Thunderhawk. There he is right there. And he's got his helmet, of course, that comes right off. And there's Matt right there. So he hangs out back here. And he also has his partner, Bruce Sato, I believe it is. I don't have the right Bruce Sato. This one is from a different vehicle. He's supposed to be orange, not blue. I do like this one better. But there's Bruce Sato. And, score 1 for a little ethnic diversity on the toy line. Dig that. And he can help him out too. Or you can, operate the tank right here. We have a functioning, military encampment here. You've got the tank. You've got the little missile station. You got defenses in the front of the truck as well. Just, an entire imagination comes alive with this thing. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, let's fire that missile. Bam, there it goes. That's a lot of fun right there. Let's make sure the roof is cleared when you do that next time. But this toy does a lot. And there's one other cool feature. We saw this in Manta earlier, but I can't get enough of it. If someone hitches a ride who is unwelcome, or maybe Matt Tracker really wants to do something heroic and doesn't want Bruce to risk himself, there's an ejector seat, which I really enjoy. There's a button back here. You have to move it out of base mode to get to it. There are those 2 buttons right there. We've already pressed this one to push the front grille, but it's the other one we're going to use right now. If you press that button, see you later, Bruce. It's really fun. This toy just does everything. Once again, you can tell the people who designed this toy were not expert Transformer designers. They were action figure and vehicle designers, and they were looking to add as many possible features as possible, as opposed to commit entirely to one big transformation. It's refreshing. It's different. It really works. And it's so much about what I love about Kenner's M.A.S.K series. And there you have it. Diaclone started this revolution of transforming toys that moved from convincing vehicle to convincing robot. Transformers and other toy lines brought that to the United States and made it bigger than ever. Kenner's M.A.S.K line took it one step further and said, let's just not make a toy that moves from one mode to the next. Let's build a whole universe around it. Let's put figures inside of those vehicles. Let's make those figures do things that actually tell a story, that respond to different situations. So it's not just one process. It was truly universe building in the greatest of traditions. M.A.S.K lasted 4 series and 2 seasons in the cartoon. And after that, it wasn't that the toys got worse, it was that attention waned. You know, the age of the home video game system was on the horizon. Nintendo had hit United States a little while earlier and was gaining more and more traction. That's what all the kids wanted instead. And so imaginative toy lines that made kids think and create and innovate went by the wayside, much to my constant regret. M.A.S.K did have a couple of imitators. Starcom, I talked about in a previous video, probably wasn't directly inspired by M.A.S.K, but had a similar idea about building an entire universe with transforming vehicles. Computer Warriors came a little bit later and had a very similar idea. And unfortunately, that toy line wasn't quite as good and certainly didn't last as long, but they had the right idea. Unfortunately, toys ever since then, there are some good toy lines out there, but they're few and far between. And a lot of times, it's toy companies trying to find something to put on the shelves, you know, for when Christmas rolls around or whatever, as opposed to really trying to tap an emerging, bustling market, because it isn't there anymore. It's moved on. Adult collectors today are helping to bring that back, but a lot of times what we're looking for is nostalgia as opposed to new innovation. So they're giving us more and more of what we had back then, as opposed to thinking forward and trying to create something different. Fortunately, Kenner M.A.S.K is coming back. You have the loyal subjects bringing these toys back to markets now. You have Ramen Toys making their third-party version of it. Kenner M.A.S.K is back for the moment, and if it sells well, it'll stay around, hopefully. But the actual innovation it represented? Maybe not. Maybe never again. I don't know. It's up to us. Until collectors like us start supporting new toy lines that are unfamiliar to us, that seem creative and exciting, we're not going to see innovation ever again. We'll be stuck with the same stuff over and over and over. And really, how many of the same Star Wars action figures can you buy, guys? How many Optimus Primes can you fit on the shelf, guys? We need different. We need new. Support companies that do that. Anyway, I'm off topic for now, but I hope you appreciated this video on Kenner M.A.S.K. I hope it brought back some nostalgia for some of you and made others of you think about what could have been and what maybe still can be if we put our money where our mouths are. If you enjoyed today's episode, we always appreciate if you hit like and subscribe. It helps our channel immensely. If you have thoughts, comments about Kenner M.A.S.K, or even especially about what your top 5 would be, hit me up in the comments. Talk to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, don't forget to check out our other videos. Obviously, we have more from Beyond Transformers. We have Spinner Rack Redux, our look at classic vintage comic books of all kinds. We have classic chiller films. I'm looking to do a new episode of that pretty soon. And of course, we've got the CCF In-Depth podcast. Check them all out. Keep coming back for more. And in the meantime, stay weird.